the Bible is a collection of books, hence the name Bible, library. Essentially, it's a collection of books which has been canonized. In other words, a community of believers has, over a period of time, come to a communal decision that this is our collection of sacred writings. If it was just one community, then you might say, well, maybe they were just going out on a limb and making it up. But the point is, let's think about what we call the Old Testament. We have rabbinical Judaism, which in the early 2nd century came to a decision about which books were authentic and which books were to be put aside as not authentic. And we have Christianity, which has done the same. And although the books are preserved in a different order, they're essentially the same books. They are identical in content. Now, the order of the books is very, very important. So we have our Old Testament, what Christians would call the Old Testament. In Judaism, we have the equivalent books arranged differently into a document called the Tanakh. The Torah, the Law, the Nevi'im, the Prophets, and the Ketuvim, the Writings. Now, the Torah consists of 5 books ascribed to Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. That is the same as how the Christian Bible begins, with those same 5 books. Then in the Jewish scriptures, you move to the prophets. Now, the prophets in the Jewish scriptures are very different to the prophets in the Christian scriptures. In the Jewish scriptures, you have the former prophets and the latter prophets, and the former prophets are Judges, Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. The latter prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the minor prophets scroll. And then you come last of all to the writings, books like Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Song of Songs and all these wonderful texts, ending, crucially, with Chronicles, ending with the Book of Chronicles. Now, the Jewish arrangement of those books is an ancient arrangement. It is the most ancient arrangement of those books, and it reflects the order of the establishing of the canon. So what it tells us is that the first 5 books of Moses were written down and established as of super authority way back in antiquity, even before the prophets and then before the writings. Probably before the Babylonian exile. Probably already by the 6th century, they were considered authoritative. They get written down in a new script from the exile, in what we would now today know as Hebrew script. But Paleo-Hebrew was used to write them before that, and we have evidence for this in the Dead Sea Scrolls and through some amulets that have been found near Jerusalem that predate the Babylonian exile. So from the change in writing style and various other points of evidence, we can know for a fact that the Torah has been considered authoritative by Jews for over 2,500 years. Now, building upon the Torah came the prophets. And the prophets were canonized a few centuries later, essentially as an authoritative, inspired commentary on Torah, telling the national history of the Jewish nation as a commentary on Torah, and preserving the writings of holy men who were always calling the nation back to the Torah. So they built the prophets around the Torah as inspired commentary on Torah, as an inspired interpretation of history. And these books, again, were already considered authoritative, already canonized by the time of Jesus. And we know this not just because of quotations in the New Testament, but because of the Dead Sea Scrolls and the way the Dead Sea Scrolls treats these texts with ultimate super respect. Okay, so by the time Jesus is walking on the earth, most of the prophets have been written and canonized, and other books like the Psalms and Proverbs and things like that, they exist and they are considered special, but they're not canonized fully until after the Romans have destroyed the temple and Rabbinic Judaism starts to emerge from that mess early in the 2nd century. That's when the final stage of that 3-stage canon is completed. Now, Christianity rejects the use of Hebrew as a language. It wants to function in Greek. So they take the Jewish Greek scriptures rather than the Jewish Hebrew scriptures. Now, the Jews had translated the Bible from Hebrew into Greek in antiquity, again in stages as the canon evolved. But the Jewish Greek Bible reordered the books. Rather than ordering them law, prophets, and writings, which made sense in Hebrew because that was the order they were canonized in, the Jewish Greek Bible ordered the Bible chronologically. And so you end up with Chronicles shifted back to the other history books, and you end up with Malachi at the end as a prophet from the Persian period. And so the Christians come along and they adopt this Jewish Greek Bible with its chronological arrangement. Now, this has an incredible, not just historical, but theological significance. Because, I don't know if you do this, if you read a novel and you don't want to bother with all that stuff in the middle, so you read the first page and you read the last page. Okay, so you read the Jewish Bible, you begin in beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then you turn to the last page and you end with Chronicles, which is a call to the Jewish nation with a Gentile king saying, Jews, go back to your homeland, rebuild Jerusalem, rebuild the temple. In other words, you end up with Zionism as the agenda at the end of the Jewish Bible. And that's how that book ends. Where the Christian order, which is this ancient Jewish Greek order, but the Christian order begins, in the beginning God created heavens, great, same start. But when you come to the end, you end up with a prophecy of, in the last days, God's going to send a special prophet. It's going to be like Elijah coming again. And you end up scratching your head going, well, who is this? Well, fortunately, then you turn over a couple of pages and you got Matthew's gospel and boom, there you go. You got John the Baptist. He's fulfilling that. So there's a great difference theologically in how you end the Bible, but it all comes back to a decision made in late antiquity where the Jews kept the Hebrew version with the traditional order and the Christians adopted the Jewish Greek order, which was chronological. And theologically, the ramifications of that are quite enormous.